folks, and welcome back. Now we're starting into Chapter 6, which is about references. Now, a reference is basically a nickname for a variable. It's another name for a variable that you've created. Whatever you do to the reference is done to the variable that it refers to. Like I said, you can think about a reference as a nickname for a variable. For example, my name is Jeffrey, but I go by Jeff, and everyone who knows me calls me Jeff. Now, Jeff is not on my birth certificate. That is not what I was named when I was born, but it's a nickname for Jeff. Think about it another way. You may know someone whose name is John, but everyone calls him Bubba. You know, that's his nickname. He answers to both. In the same way, a reference is a nickname for a variable, and the variable will answer to both. Now, there's a few reasons why you might want to use a nickname for a variable. The one reason is if you want to alter an argument that you've passed to a function. When you pass a variable to a function, the programmer, the compiler, and the program itself creates a copy of that variable. Now, the result of that is that you cannot change the original variable. You may be able to change the copy of that variable depending on your compiler and other factors, but you cannot change the variable itself. If you want to be able to change the variable, the original variable, from inside a function, you can accomplish that using a reference to that variable. The other big reason to use references is for efficiency. Okay, now, when you're copying a variable from the main function of your program into another function, this creates additional overhead. When you're just dealing with ints, floats, some of the the smaller built-in types, this impact is almost nil. It's negligible. You may never notice a performance hit from doing it. However, let's say you've got an object that you have programmed, a large object that represents, the example Dawson gives is a representation of a full 3D world. If you then pass a copy of that object, you're doubling the size that object takes. So if your 3D world is huge, and let's say the object takes up, we'll just say 200 megabytes worth of memory. When you copy that over into another function, you're now taking 400 megabytes of memory for that one object. And that can cause a huge performance drain on your program. If you're passing that object to a function, the better way to do it is to use a reference, because the reference itself is tiny. It's just it just points to the original variable. It doesn't actually copy the whole variable. It's basically a shortcut to get from one part of your program to another, and be able to access that variable and all of its data, manipulate it and modify it and so on. I'm working real hard to avoid the phrase point to, because in the next chapter we'll have pointers, which they're in the same vein as references, but they are significantly different. So just for the sake of argument, just say that the reference is a nickname. It's a shorter way to access the full name. Most people, when they have nicknames, their nicknames are shorter than their full name. Jeff is only 4 letters. Jeffrey is 7. It's a shorter version of my name. So we're going to see references in action. We'll start off with some very simple references. Just a very simple program that declares and initializes a variable to hold a score, and then it creates a reference to refer to that variable. And it will display the score using first the variable and then the reference to show that they access the same single value. Then it will show how we can modify that value. We can alter it through either the reference or the variable. So let's go ahead and get started on that. and I have my new text document, and I'm going to save that. Get into the correct directory here, and I'm going to name this program references.cpp. And we will begin with our initial comments. Okay, I'll include IOStream, and I'm going to be working just with integers for this program. I'm not using any strings here, so I don't need to include any other files. The referencing concept is built into C++. You do not need any additional files in order to use references. So I'll declare that I'm using the namespace std and open up my main function. Okay, so I'll start by declaring an integer variable called myScore, and I'll set that equal to 1000. Now, to create a reference, I specify what the type of variable is that I'm referencing, and then the ampersand. So int ampersand. Ampersand is the and symbol. You can find that when you hit shift and then the number 7 on the top row of your keyboard. So I have int ampersand Mike's score equals my score. And I'll just make a comment that this is creating a reference. Okay, Mike's score equals my score. This creates a reference called Mike's score, which is referencing the integer variable my score. Now, my score is, and we'll print out the initial value of my score. And then Mike's score is, and now we'll print out the initial value of Mike's score. And we're actually going to do 2 line returns here. Now, we're going to add 500 to my score. So we'll say my score is equal to my score plus 500. And now we'll print out our new variable value. My score is, my score, new line. Mike's score is, Mike's score, and then 2 line returns. Now, to show that we can also modify that original variable using a reference, we'll add 500 to Mike's score. And we'll do Mike's score is equal to Mike's score plus 500. See out. My score is my score. And see out. Mike's score is Mike's score. Two line returns. Okay. That should do it for this program, so we'll return 0 and close out our main function. Now I can save it and compile. Okay, now when I run it, so first two lines, it says my score is 1,000, Mike's score is 1,000. Then we add 500 to my score. So now my score is 1,500. Mike's score is also 1,500 because Mike's score is just a reference to my score. So any change that is made to my score will also apply to the reference Mike's score. Now we add 500 to Mike's score. My score is changed because Mike's score is a reference to my score. Okay, so when we modify Mike's score, we're really modifying my score. The reference is not changed. It's just the original variable that's changed. And then we see that both values are the same because this line, or if we look here, this line is not referring to a variable called Mike's score. It's referring to a reference called Mike's score. And the reference Mike's score is a reference to the integer variable my score. Now, one trick that a lot of programmers will use in order to make sure that they remember that they're working with a reference is they'll preference the reference with the letter R. So what I may do if I wanted to follow tradition is have R Mike's score equals my score, and that R would tell me that this is a reference. Okay, that is it for the introduction to references. In our next video, we'll do a little more with them, so stay tuned for that.